Welcome to Tapping Vegas, brought to you guys by Better and Green, and today we are breaking down what to do about the state of UFC judging, MMA judging in general. We're going to kind of talk about the UFC today. 4 weeks off the UFC took, so we are kind of looking for a little bit of content to talk about. This is one of the things that, Bobby, PEDs and judging have been some of the topics that you've been hitting on lately, and judging seems to be the hot one right now. It's been a hot one for a while, and so I'm going to let you take over. This is going to be a big Bobby episode. I will chime in here and there, but I want to hear what you have to say, man, about the state of judging.
Yeah, and feel free to interject at any point. But yeah, as you mentioned, judging and scoring, the two go hand in hand, right? You get judging from the scoring, and I know that sounds really elementary and self-explanatory, but after Aaron Bronstetter with the Kobe Covington, Joaquin Buckley card, and how he came up with some things on the Adrian Yanez fight, let's just say we have to break it down Barney style for people nowadays. So we're really getting to some grassroots elementary education for our friends out there like Mr. Bronstetter. So first thing we're going to go over is, yes, you cannot have MMA judging without MMA scoring. That is how you get judging, is by going off what are the supposed scoring criteria in mixed martial arts. Now, as you're going to quickly find as we go through this conversation, there's a lot of issues with how we're even coming up with scoring, right? And so, like, I came into this originally thinking I was going to just go scorched earth on judges and on some crazy scorecards that we've seen and everything. But the more research I did, the more I talked to people, the more I kind of delved into this, the more I started to actually feel sympathy for people who have to judge UFC fights. And that's another thing that kind of further proves my point, right? So the UFC and I say this in finger quotes, unified in finger quotes rules of MMA. What are they unifying? Because they're not even the consensus across the board rules for all mixed martial arts organizations. So that's why we have to specifically fixate just on the UFC and what rule set they use. Because, for example, there was a lot that we talked about when it came to the Pantoja fight and Ryzen's rules with Haraguchi. Because Haraguchi, coming from Ryzen, what would be considered a foul in the UFC was perfectly fair game, and Ryzen rules for Haraguchi. So it's going to be, Asakura. I was thinking of Haraguchi because I just watched Demetrius Johnson and Haraguchi or whoever it was.
Gotcha.
Before I get too off topic with how ridiculous this is going to get, because it's already going to be confusing just explaining all the differences in UFC rules, I'll just leave it short, simple, to the point. We're going to talk about UFC rules because the UFC has its own set of rules. It's not truly unified. Let's say that right now. Ryzen has rules that what is a legal strike in Ryzen would be a foul in the UFC. Knees to grounded opponents, things of that nature, for example. There because it's going to get confusing enough. All right. So here's my main thing. My main thing is, as it is right now, since the rules were officially kind of on the table and adopted in about 2000 for the UFC, the unified rules as it stands, even with all the changes, right? Because since about 2001, 2000, when the rules were adopted, they were first kind of put in place and the UFC started kind of abiding by these rules. There's been roughly, give or take, like we'll say, and before people chime in the comments, actually it was 7, actually it was 6. We're just going to say real quick, about 9 changes, 9, amendments, whatever you want to call them, to the rules since 2000 for the UFC. Now, in that same rough time span since 2002, the NFL has made over 50 changes to the rules. You would think, wow, 50 changes since 2002, only about give or take 9 since roughly 2001 for the UFC. The NFL must be really difficult to watch and follow along with for anybody, let alone a complete, new viewer. Wrong. In my humble opinion, the NFL is far easier to understand and far easier to follow along with, even for a complete new viewer. Roughly by the end of a standard length football game for the NFL, you could probably figure out, if you're actually paying attention, what's going on, how scoring works, all that. MMA, it's completely it's completely like monolithic to a novice. It's completely monolithic to people who even have been watching for years like I have. It still gets confusing and it still differs based on commission to commission. And here's an example, right? Let's just look up what constitutes a touchdown in the NFL. A touchdown is scored when a player carries or catches the ball into the opposing team's end zone and any part of the ball crosses the goal line. What counts? Any part of the ball crossing the goal line, either above, on, or across it. Who scores? A player on the team trying to score in that end zone. Officials on the goal line, well, their job is to make sure the ball carrier breaks the imaginary 3D plane of the goal line. What happens after? The offense is given an additional opportunity to score if it stands. Pretty cut and dry, right? Pretty simple, right? I haven't lost anybody so far, I hope. So another thing is, when a touchdown is scored in the NFL, how many points is it worth?
6.
It's worth 6 points, right?
Every time.
Easy to follow along with, huh?
Every time.
Every time. Every time. 6 points. Touchdown, 6 points. Now, obviously, we can disagree. Did the person have control? Did it break the plane? But we're just saying 6 points every time. It's consistent. Now, let me read you the unified rules, the most updated unified rules of MMA that I could find. All right. Let me read you. They just do scoring, even trying to figure out what scoring is. All right. It says judging criteria, Appendix A, subsection C. Judges shall evaluate mixed martial arts techniques such as effective striking/grappling. That is what they refer to as Plan A. Effective aggressiveness is their Plan B, they're calling it. And control of the fighting area is what they call Plan C. And it even says immediately following that, Plans B, referring to effective aggressiveness, and Plan C, referring to control of the fighting area. It says that those plans B and C, are not, I repeat, not taken into consideration unless Plan A is weighed as being even. I've already lost myself, because how do you determine if effective striking and grappling, their Plan A, is even? There's nothing in there that tells you what even looks like. And it proceeds to say, evaluation shall be made in the specific order in which the techniques appear in C above, giving the most weight in scoring to effective striking/grappling and effective aggressiveness and control of the fighting area. What does that mean? It says effective striking is judged by determining the impact/effect of legal strikes landed by a contestant solely based on the results of such legal strikes. What does that mean, the results? Is it talking about damage? Oh, there's even a part that talks about that. Wait, it's about to get more confusing, because it doesn't even call it damage. I'm thinking that damage is referred to as impact, because they have impact in here as their subsection 2, and it says impact. A judge shall assess if a fighter impacts their opponent significantly in the round, even though they may not have dominated the action. How can you impact your opponent significantly
without dominating?
Without dominating the action's the first thing I think, right? Okay, so impact includes visible evidence such as swelling and laceration. So once again, in my head, I'm thinking damage. But that might not even be accurate, because it goes on to say, impact shall also be assessed when a fighter's actions using striking and or grappling leads to a diminishing of their opponent's energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit. How do you determine that? That's very subjective. All of these come as a direct result of impact. Here's the most confusing part, right? So remember, I know it's already getting confusing, and I'm not being facetious. It really is already confusing. But remember how we said Plan A was effective striking and grappling, and Plan B was aggression, and Plan C was control of the fight. And it said that you have to give the most consideration to effective striking and grappling. Unless it's even, then you go to the aggression, then you go to the control of the fighting area. Well, add this into the mix. When a fighter is impacted by strikes, by lack of control and or ability, this can create defining moments in the round and shall be assessed with great value. Okay, we're on a 10-point scoring system. Then why don't you give me a number instead of just saying shall be assessed with great value? Because that leaves it open to a lot of interpretation at that point. And don't even get me started on the 10-point scoring system, because the rules also say that you essentially, so let's go over that before that gets confusing, right? So what constitutes like a 10-9, a 10-8, a 10-7, things of that nature? It just already gets confusing, and the rules have only been changed once again, give or take, about 9 times since 2001, whereas the NFL has changed the rules about 50 times. And the rules of NFL are still a lot more clear. And while I'm trying to even figure out what they say 10-9, 10-8, 10-7 constitutes, here's why this is important, right? For the UFC and MMA to continue to be taken seriously as a sport, one of the things that needs to change is you can't just have rule sets differing even from commission to commission, because another source of constant controversy and constant issue is, once again, I don't know why we keep calling these rules unified, because they're arbitrary and they're subjective from commission to commission. I'll give you an example, right? Colorado allows open scoring. So that means in boxing and MMA, the fighter can be made aware of the scores in between rounds. The public, the audience, whoever's watching at home, watching live, is made aware of the scores each round by round, right? Basically, at the end of the round, you kind of have an idea of what's going on. The scoring's out there. You can know what's going to happen, right? Now, whether you agree or disagree with that, you can see how that's going to be a problem when you're a fighter in the UFC. And, one fight you have in March, they use open scoring, but, later when you fight in like October, they don't use open scoring, right? Better or worse, you can see how that could be a problem. Once again, to try to put it in terms to make it easy for viewers to understand and kind of conceptualize, if you're a basketball fan, if you're an NFL, imagine every time, the field ball, the points valuation of a touchdown changed versus whether they were at home or on the road. Every time, the Celtics or, whatever your NBA team is played, depending on what venue they were at, what state they were at, there were different little changes to, like, I don't know, something that happens in MMA, the use of instant replay, which we can't even agree on that. So before we get too into the weeds on this, and before I just bore people by reading off the rules and just kind of making light of it, I'll kind of cut it short and kind of get down to these main points here, right? The rules are very arbitrary. They're very subjective. Once again, to break this down Barney style, what does subjective mean? Subjective means it is basically of your views. It is of your opinion. There's not really anything that's really quantitative. Quantitative meaning like hard numbers, hard data, research, science to back it up. It's just kind of like your subjective opinion. You just kind of feel that way. I felt that strike was significant, that type of thing. If you take the quantitative approach, you use numbers, you use data, science, things like that to pick up and to prove your point. So quantitative versus qualitative. Qualitative, subjective. Quantitative, objective. Objective, you can't just say, well, I disagree, because you have to come up with numbers. You have to come up with things to support your idea. So MMA judging and scoring, there needs to be a happy medium that serves to exist. Okay, I feel like that was significant, but you need to have clear wording. I think that MMA judging and scoring would benefit from clear wording, because all these amendments and all these changes that they've made throughout the years have just been kind of like piecemeal things. I mean, we just recently allowed 12-6 elbows. This past November, it was finally effective. So change is just very painful. It's very hard to come by, but we have to get a good balance between quantitative, numbers-based, data-based statistics for how to score, for how to judge. We need to strike that balance with that, and qualitative, subjective. Okay, I feel like that was huge. I feel like that, change the momentum of the fight, change the spirit of the fighter, these things. Because right now, it's very unclear, and you get contradictory mixed messages like, oh, well, plan A, I'm supposed to primarily go to effective grappling and striking. But if that's even, then I go to plan B, which is aggression. Then I go to plan C, which is, control of the fight space. And then you add in impact, damage, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, well, where does that fall into my ABC system? And there really is no excuse for this much confusion, because I also found on the UFC's website MMA referee and judge training outline, effective date 10/29/2009. And anybody out there at home, if you know who Adelaide Bird is or whatever the hell her name is, please tell me in the comments, Twitter, whatever you follow us on, if you think MMA judge training outline from the UFC's official website, do you think that Adelaide Bird or any of these judges are actually going through with what they are supposed to be going through in their training outline, which is, for example, 5 years professional MMA judging experience? Okay, some of them probably have that. Nothing too crazy so far, especially Bird. She's been around for a long time, far longer than she should be. Must possess adequate knowledge to recognize and describe various holds, throws, takedowns, and submission techniques. Must be able to present instructional material to a wide range of individuals with varying educational backgrounds. Provide a full resume. Provide any prior teaching experience. The course goes over code of ethic, conflicts of interest, dealing with the media, socializing with others at the venue, discussing the scoring of fights with others. Proper appearance, what's a 10-10 round, a 10-8 round, discuss rear mount, side mount, the guard, handling a loud crowd, dealing with a hometown favorite, break down a 5-minute round. If they truly are doing all these things that they say they're supposed to be doing, then why do we still have crazy scores? Why do we still have all this trouble, all this difficulty coming up with basic decisions? I think another thing that is absolutely ridiculous is that judges don't apparently sit. And once again, I don't even know if this is true for all commissions, all venues, or does it change? But judges don't even all sit in the same place. They all have access to, obviously, the live right there in front of them view wherever they're sitting at in the arena. But then down below on their desk area, they have access to a monitor. So they each have access to a monitor. They each have access to a real-time, obviously in front of their eyes, view of what's going on in the octagon. But why do they have to be set up in different vantage points? And I'm asking why, because I don't believe that should be their job. The person whose job it is to be in different vantage points is already in that position, and that's the referee. Because the referee is the one who needs to be able to see, is a foul being committed? Is this, illegal? Is there cheating? Is there things like that going on? Like, I feel like if you have people in different points, and this is what Bronstetter said as his justification for how you can have wildly different scorecards between three judges, is three different people can have three different viewpoints based on where they're sitting. We're no shit, Sherlock, and that's why I think it's a problem, because your perception is subjective. So put everybody on the same even playing field. Give everybody the same table. Sit them boom, 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 right in a row next to each other. They all have their little monitor. They all look up and see everything. Because another problem is, and I don't know if this has been rectified, somebody please chime in the comments if it has, as of at least 2 years ago, and roughly 2022, John McCarthy said one of the judges basically was sitting in front, so positioned to where they had to look through the closed door of the octagon to see what's going on. How is that beneficial just because it's a different vantage point to have somebody basically watching a live fight through a mesh screen? How is that helping anybody come up with a more fair, balanced decision? I don't understand it. It's doing it just for the sake of doing it. And that's why I get so angry when dumbasses like Bronstetter are like, well, of course they can have different views. Yes, and you're proving my point that it's a problem. And it's a problem because, yeah, there's incentives in NFL contracts. You'll get a bonus if you get, this amount of rushing yards, passing yards, receiving yards. You can get bonuses, but nobody's going to tell Josh Allen, you only got, let's see, you threw 3 touchdowns in this game. We'd really like you to get 5. Your contract says that. So now, sorry, Josh, you're losing half your pay. But that's the reality of MMA. That's the reality of life in the UFC. You lose a fight based on poor judging, ineffective judging, ignorant judging. Guess what? Half your money's instantly gone. You keep mounting up losses. That could be the end of your career. I mean, yeah, people can get fired in the NFL if they lose, but they're usually a lot more apt to give you kind of, some leniency unless you're just absolutely stringing together an unprecedented bad season before they can you. They might bench you a game or two. In the UFC, it's brutal. Half pay, and guess what? You get 2 more of those in a row, you might lose your job. So that's why you kind of get this. So just to kind of reiterate problems, MMA judging and scoring, because judging and scoring, as we said earlier, go hand in hand. Judges base the score. They get their scores based off scoring, or at least they're supposed to. I don't know anymore what they're doing because it's so damn confusing. But the problem with that is it's subjective. It's unclear. They make all these changes. Nobody knows what's going on, and you have to have 12 tabs open on your computer to try to make any sense of it. It differs state to state, commission to commission. Some states don't even have a commission. Apparently, New York doesn't. I don't know how the hell that's possible. Right. And then they each have their own different rules. Like, how many times do you hear them on the announcing team say, "Oh, we're in so-and-so state, and the rule here in so-and-so state is this," like I mentioned with Colorado and the open judging? I mean, like, another big misconception. Nowhere in the rules does it rank damage as the most important impact. And the rules are subjective, and most judges have a different interpretation of the rules. That's why you have split decisions, because Judge A's interpretation of the rules, since it's so subjective, is different from Judge B's, different from Judge C's. The point system, like I said, a lot of these judges, they use like their own little scale that they have, like their own personal little way of figuring things out. They don't share that with other judges. They very rarely talk about it. They don't teach other people. Like, the judges that are usually at these fights have been around, like Adelaide Bird, for decades, and they don't really try to teach anybody else like their system. And the problem is, if we're using a 10-point system, and they highly discourage you from giving a 10-10, which is basically a draw. And they highly also discourage you from giving a 10-7 round, which is just an absolute dominant round by the 10-point fighter. And you never, like, I can't, at least once again, the UFC, please somebody point it out in the comments, chirp at us. I've never heard of a 10-6, 10-5, 10-4, 10-3, 2-1, 0. So why even have it? Why even have it if it's only if the lowest it's gonna go is 10-7? Why even use that scoring system? Somebody said to account for foul deductions. Don't make me laugh. Because we can't even agree. That's its own separate topic. We can't even get into the problems with the foul system. That's its own monster. That's its own entity. So I'm not buying that. So that's a problem in and of itself, even with the scoring system. If you're not even going to use all points of the scoring system, I don't see it seems useless. It seems redundant. They have to have special 10-8 training sessions for judges. They just had one like 2 years ago. And the problem with that is you're supposed to be getting all this training. So my question is, without turning this into a long ramble, is where is the problem if it's not the scoring? If you are truly getting all this training and all these things are expected of you, I don't understand how we still come up with these crazy scores if it's not your placement, if your placement's not terrible, because that's something that, like I said, is just useless if the scoring system itself isn't useless. The other thing is that scoring system was brought over from boxing when it made a lot of sense to have a system like that. But we can't judge effective submission attempts. Like, you're supposed to get credit for submission attempts. I don't know that you do. And there was also a part in the rules where it's like effective grappling, but it says, effective grappling isn't just controlling your opponent, aka basically being a wet blanket. Well, I personally hate wet blanket grappling, but I can't, objectively using quantitative data say that that's not damn effective, because it's boring, but it shouldn't play a part in judging. It shouldn't play a part in scoring unless you want to change the rules. So we've talked a lot about problems in MMA, problems with the judging, problems with the scoring, how problems with the scoring cause problems with the judging. So how do we fix it, right? So we can't get consistent with how often we hand out 10-8s. We can't get consistent with how often we do 10-7s or 10-10s. Even though we say in the rules 10-10s are supposed to be rare and 10-7s are supposed to be rare, and this is kind of, the level of dominance to expect and all that, it's still very subjective. It's still very much your opinion. But here are some ideas that we have that we can try to start fixing this, right? So why is it a problem? Why is it important that we fix this? It's important because in 3-round fights, which are 99% of the fights we have, except for obviously championship and main event fights, there's 3 judges, 3 rounds, and only 9 scores. You almost entirely lose 1 round, you're out of the fight, right? Yet we still see so many different people come up with crazy scorecards, even based off what they know to be in the rules, that it's ruining lives, it's ruining careers. And it's important, in addition to all those reasons, it's important because with the rise of AI, we're getting to a point where if things, stay pretty much the same that they've been for years now, with minor amendments, minor changes to the rules, things of that nature, if things stay at that rate, which unfortunately it's looking like they are, right? Because the hardest thing to do is actually change. For better or for worse, making a change is hard. It's too easy to just be complacent, leave things as they are. B, we move to what I personally would like to see, and I'll give evidence as to why I think it's the best. We move to a mix of programming and like computer input, software-based input that still has a human being entering data, kind of check their work, kind of show their work with the system type thing. I personally think that's the best. I'll get to why here in a second. Or C, and unlike the unified rules of MMA, I'm not going to contradict myself on this. C, entirely AI. That's basically kind of the 3 solutions I see that we're faced with right now. Because it's easy to complain about, oh, okay, here's everything that's wrong, I'm not going to offer a solution. Looking at you, Bronstetter. Or be smug and just be happy that your finger quotation's right because you called something bullshit. Like, oh, I'm proud because I argued with the schizophrenic homeless guy outside of Walmart and I won the argument. Well, it kind of says something about you that you're entertaining the argument with the guy in the first place. But I digress. So A, you leave things as they are, continue to reap the negatives and the positives. B, you move towards software computer-based with human input. C, you just do straight AI. Here's why I think A is wrong. I gave you all the reasons. Moving on to B.
Okay.
I met a guy on MMA Twitter, MMA Judge Analyzer. Please, seriously, look this guy up. He's great. MMA Judge Analyzer. His @ is Judge Analyzer. He's got a logo. He's got the judge's gavel. Red and blue shield says Judge Analyzer. Should be easy to find him. Seriously, please look him up. Talk to him on Twitter. Real cool dude. Love his program. I'm not going to try to explain it because I want to do it justice. I want people to go out there. I want them to follow his Twitter, look at his Twitter, see it for themselves, because I don't want to leave anything out because it's that good. What I like about his program, though, to give you a short little synopsis that makes it at least somewhat understandable, because it's a pretty advanced program, and I want you to know what you're getting yourself into, is he has a software-based program that tallies strikes, tallies takedowns, scores, et cetera, et cetera. He graphs it. The software graphs it for him. Basically, he's judging the fight himself as the fight's happening live, and he's using this scoring system to kind of like show his work, so to say. It's basically his scratch pad where it takes what he's recording and puts it in graphs, puts it in tables, and makes sense of it. It allows him to see where he's went wrong, where like he's different from the judges, where the judges got things wrong, things like that. Great program. Seriously, MMA Judge Analyzer, check it out. I think that's better than just leaving things as they are. I'm not really an AI guy. I like people to have jobs. I think there needs to be a human element to things. And I'm not even completely poo pooing on subjectiveness in MMA because this is where the human side does shine through, right? You do need a human to physically be there, to kind of feel the roar of the crowd, to kind of hear things in real time, right? Obviously, strikes in the arena sound way different than strikes on TV or strikes, our human senses obviously are way different than AI. And that is, at least as of right now, something we have over AI is our sense of smell, our taste, our hearing. Those things, at least right now, are not capable of an AI program to replicate. Those things do play a role in judging. So there is a role for subjectiveness of scoring. I'm just arguing that right now it is too subjective. It needs to be more balanced. It needs to be more equally distributed because right now it's too far on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I think this is the best way to reconcile it if you use a program like the Judge Analyzers, because you still have that human element there to keep it accountable, because AI is not infallible. AI makes mistakes also. I know people like to think it's like the Terminator and it's just this perfect machine, but it makes mistakes. So you need to have that human there to kind of catch those mistakes. The AI is a lot faster, though, than somebody at keeping track, right? Like if you expected a judge to have like a tally mark sheet for every strike, every sub attempt or whatever, you're just going to miss things. You're just, especially in a high paced fight, you're going to miss things. Things are going to slip by and all that. So you have to have a software based program to kind of account for where you might miss some things that are just right now humanly impossible. I don't think option C, full AI, is the best option because I want human beings to have jobs. I want them to be able to bring that little bit of subjectiveness to fights, to be able to, like, an AI right now can't tell if like your spirit is being impacted by the impact of your opponent's grappling or punches or whatever. It's not really able, at least that I hear, to judge emotions and whether they're wilting under the onslaught of a barrage of strikes. So I don't think full blown AI is the answer either because it's not advanced enough. It doesn't have that subjective human nature to it. And it's going to make it a lot more boring, right? Like people should like be able to have that feeling of like, this is my job. I take pride in it. I enjoy this. Like if you're passionate about martial arts, this should be a career field that if you want to make a change and God knows it needs it, you should be able to get involved in. But if you do agree, because all I'm doing on this show with you is presenting viewpoints of what I think is wrong with judging, scoring, and solutions to it. So we've covered the problem, we've covered solutions, and then to wrap it up, what do I think is best? Well, I told you I think option B, courtesy of MMA Judge Analyzer, is best. But if you think A, B, or C is better, then tell us why. Because you could make an argument very easily for either A, B, or C, and I'd be able to see it through your eyes. But that's why I think option B is the best. And like I said, option C, if you're interested in that, check out jabber.ai. That's the other Twitter page that I was kind of going along with to get an idea of, okay, where is my research going to lead me to the other end of the spectrum, right? As opposed to leaving it like it is, as opposed to using a mix of human to AI. What if we did go completely just balls to the wall, option C, just full AI? Jabber.ai is actually what made me very scared. It's what makes me think that things, if they don't change, are going to get drastically bad and we won't have an option B. We're just going to go straight from A to C, and it's just going to eventually be straight AI. They already talked about it with the Tyson Fury fight, the Tyson Fury Usyk fight that just happened in boxing. They've already been discussing it. It's only going to get bigger. AI is going to keep growing. I don't want full AI judge fights. Don't get me wrong. Once again, I'm giving credit to this individual behind this also. Please check out jabber.ai. I think it's great. And like I said, it instantly left me with no hope. It's already better than most human judges. It actually measures aggression. It actually measures who's controlling the space and things of that nature. Really, honestly, so far, the only flaw I've seen with it is boxing's easier to judge than MMA, right? That's why we basically bastardized boxing rules and turned them and twisted them into our current god-awful scoring system we have now and why we have trouble judging grappling and judging, you don't get points for offense. You don't get points for defense because the rules say MMA is an offensive sport. Yet, how do you reconcile that? Blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this thing's already got aggression and control of the fight space down. It's not going to be long before it's going to be ready for MMA. They're still playing around with and testing their MMA version of it. It's not that long. Like I said, it's already better than most humans. So if you're interested, that's the AI side of things. MMA Judge Analyzer is my preferred option, and then there's not really much to do if you like things as they are. But regardless of how you feel, like, comment, subscribe, let us know. Tell us we're stupid. We'll probably tell you you're stupid back. Join the Aaron Bronstetter Hate Club. I'm the president. Follow us on Twitter, socials, everything else. I'll have an article coming out that goes along with this video if you'd prefer to read everything. I like you. You're my person. If you're still reading some print, thank you.
Big time.
I'll have an article out by tomorrow. It's been a problem for a very long time. It's not getting better. And if anything, I really think we're heading towards, I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. Please don't kill me.
Man, I don't want to get any hate, but I'm on Team Jabber here, man. I'm on Team C. We do a lot of, because there are two big shows on here, our football and MMA, we do a lot of like comparisons to the NFL. So I'll say this, Bobby, here real quick for you. So back when like the Chiefs had Tyreek Hill, or the 2013 Seahawks and the no-fly zone. I think Legion of Boom. Sorry, Legion of Boom. I think no-fly zone.
Yeah, Legion of Boom. Yeah.
Whenever the Seahawks had huge hits, or Tyreek Hill had an awesome punt return. Okay, that's great. Like, those are great plays. But how many points is that worth? 0.
I actually don't know the answer to that one. Oh, 0? Yeah.
0. You get a big tackle. It's like, great. You got a big tackle, great play. You have a, better field position, whatever. So I feel like taking the subjective part out, like, the crowd, and this is my view on damage. You can't really tell with, like, the gut shots and stuff. If you're watching, like, these guys that are doing the impact test, like how hard you can punch, if you're just looking at the bag, you don't know the difference. It changes with each weight class, and it's the only thing that's going to change for the body shots is going to be a knockdown, right? You're not going to be able to see anything else from that. So the damage, I feel like if it's bad enough to be something that you need to take into account, usually what happens? A ref stoppage, right? If he's bleeding enough, the ref's going to stop it. If he goes down because, crumpled a kidney, he's on the ground getting punched, ref's going to stop it. I feel like damage should be taken out, which I know that might be quite the I might have got a couple people mad on that one. I really don't think damage should be a factor in there. And then if you're looking at why isn't DraftKings your daily fantasy lineups for MMA, how come those aren't done by judges? How come those have a standardized set of control time, of takedowns, all the stats the UFC keeps track of? And one of the things that just kills me every time is when you're watching a UFC event and you have a big head over there talking about, 24 strikes to 20 in the first round. That's, the judges don't have that, but we can see that. Why is the most important person besides the fighters, why do they not have that information?
Exactly. It's another thing that I completely forgot. Thank you for mentioning that. We have access as viewers at home to way more information, and sometimes it's irrelevant, right? Like submission attempts, for all the talk and the unified rules of how that's supposed to count. Does it? Is there a judge? Does any judge actually sit there tallying that up? Like, how do you quantify that? Do you just go off raw number? Like, he attempted it 1. Like, what point value do you give that? Is that 1 point? Do you give that 2 points? Like, how do you? It's easy enough to say, submission attempts count. Okay, make it a little bit more clear and a little more concise. Tell me how much. Is that 1 point, 10 points? Like, is it 2 points? What is it? It's not enough to just say submission attempts count as effective grappling and striking, which is your plan A. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head with damage. And once again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. That's why we're asking for other people's input. Nobody's going to be stupid. Nobody's going to look like an idiot. Like, we get a little carried away. We get a little passionate on this show. But unless you're Aaron Bronstetter, as long as you come at it respectful and everything, you're not going to get clowned on. Now, if you don't, that's a different story. And you're going to get what you get because you did what you did. But, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, to get back on topic, as long as you come at it from respectful, like I said, I see that there's 3 options. Maybe there's not. Maybe you think there's 4. Let us know what option 4 to you is. But right now, I think there's only 3. I think we're heading towards AI for all the reasons you said, because damage, like you made a good point about damage. What happens if there's enough damage? The ref stops it. That even differs commission to commission, further illustrating how that's not even it's not even the most important factor in deciding a fight in our ABC 3-plan system. Right there in the rules, the Unified Official Rules PDF. Go on there if you don't believe us and check it out. There's been 16 iterations. Make sure you got the right one to add to the confusion. Like New York can stop a fight at the drop of a hat. Like that was the big thing with Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal, right? Yeah, maybe he didn't see, maybe he couldn't see, but usually most people would think in any other commission, we all know those commissions out there, they're a little too flighty, a little too quick to call a fight. And then you got the opposite end of the spectrum where you have those commissions, because the unified rules aren't even unified and it differs commission to commission, where they'll just be like, if he dies, he dies. I need to see a little bit more cerebrospinal fluid before I call it. So it's damage, and it's not even called damage. It's called impact. So I'm just putting words in their mouth potentially, because I don't even know if that's what they mean. They say cuts, lacerations, bruises.
Bobby, let me ask you a question here real quick too. With 2 big fights that people probably saw, the one that we just had to end the year, and then Noche in the Sphere. You remember that one? I can't remember her name, but the women's fight, and she her nose was almost falling off, and she had that huge cut down her face, and we were like, "That's brutal."
Oh, Aldana.
And it went to decision.
Was the one that had the giant rash. Yeah.
Yes, and then Covington, his fight just got waved off for damage.
Right, because
doesn't even compare. Cut. Yeah, doesn't even compare. Hers was 1,000 times worse. Didn't get stopped. His, maybe it was a fair stoppage. Maybe it wasn't. That is subjective for that stop. But if you're asking which one of those are worse, hers is 1 billion times worse, and that one went to decision. Right.
So we just can't agree on any element. But maybe that part ties into the reffing, which that's its own issue. We haven't even touched reffing. We spent all this time just on judging and scoring, trying not to get sidetracked on fouls and how fouls can play a role in the 10-point scoring system, even though we never go below 7 points. Just don't even get me started again. But yeah, let us know what you think, because like I said, you make good points about the damage. And like you said, yeah, the oohs and the ahs and the big plays are great, but like you said with the punt return, and I know it's apples to oranges, right? It's 2 different sports, and that's why I'm complaining, because we're basing our sport off a bastardized boxing system, and you can't do that. You need a different rule set. Another change that I would propose before we start, seeing nothing but AI rolled out and everybody suddenly starts bitching about AI, because once again, AI is not infallible, people. It can make mistakes too. But it damn sure won't be making subjective mistakes, which are the biggest problem in MMA right now. It damn sure won't be saying, well, I felt like this or I felt like that. Don't even get me started. It's just going to be a cold calculating machine just crushing your skull underneath its little treadmill tire wheels. And you're going to be crying at home because you're not Aaron Bronstetter and your ass is out of a job like you should have been 10 years ago. But I'm going to quit going scorched earth on the dude. He can holler at me. But to wrap it all up, something needs to change. And these little incremental will amend every year, every 2 years things, but not really do anything until this past November, when we finally made 12-6 elbows legal, which should have been legal from the start based on outdated research and kung fu wushu bullshito crap. If you're going to make changes, you need to start doing something drastic, because like I said, NFL's changed rules 50 times since 2002. MMA for the UFC specifically, because that's all we can go off of, because it gets confusing otherwise, about 9 times since 2001. Still way easier to follow football than it is UFC. If you're going to make changes, Here's another suggestion, because once again, I'm proposing suggestions, not just complaining. Start small, right? Start small with like your Dana White Contender Series, for example. Start testing out new little changes to the rules every season of Contender Series. See how it works, see how it doesn't. Make it incremental until you do find something that works, so that when you do finally amend the rules or change the rules or procedures or however we're using mental gymnastics to go about making these changes, when you actually do it, it's significant, and it hopefully solves these issues before judging and scoring gets replaced entirely by computers and AI software. Just start incrementally at like Contender Series. See what works and all that, and just go from there. Try that. It doesn't have to be a sweeping, crazy change. Get states to have athletic commissions. Get those state athletic commissions to use all the same rules, to make it truly unified like you say it is. Just do that, at least for the UFC. Like I said, we can't control Ryzen. We can't control Bellator, PFL, whatever they're calling themselves nowadays, one. But at least from the UFC, if you're calling yourself the premier mixed martial arts organization, not just in the United States, but the entire world, if you can't change the world and you're global, that's fine, but at least make it consistent in the states. At least figure something out for the states.
If DraftKings can figure out how to score, you should be able to figure out how to score your own Fighters UFC. And one more question before we get out of here, Bobby. Why are takedowns scored differently depending on if you're from a cornfield in Nebraska or, let's say, I don't know, not to name more specific, but maybe like a place in a mountain up in northeastern Asia?
Bro, you're going to make some people mad with that one, bro.
I know.
You're gonna be, hey, cut the show. You're about to get Epstein, dude. They're about to find you in an isolated cell, nobody around, no bed sheets, just a strip mattress, somehow with 2 gunshots in the back of your head. It's because it's subjective. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you want it to be. Reality is what you want it to be. If you think when you jump out the 3rd story window you're gonna fly, then buddy, you're Dumbo.
Guys, thank you for watching. We are going to have more content for you guys coming out once again, like Bobby. He'll have his article coming out here soon. Check out bettergreen.com. Guys, UFC is going to be back here soon, so we'll have more of our picks and predictions coming out, maybe some more type of videos like this too, so make sure you guys stick around for those, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace, guys.
Peace.